Boot it up, lights go green. Controllers ready, enter the scene. From builds to battle, stats to strats, breaking down the games, yeah, imagine that. No save takes, no reload, every level deeper on the Sean Zay show. Turn it up, lock it in, match begins, let the talk begin. Sean Zay, hit play, let's go. Game talk loud on the Sean Zay show. No pause, no lag, all control. This is game time on the Sean Zay show. Strap in, squad up, take your seat. Sean Zay every week.
Hello and welcome all.
Try again.
Hi and welcome all to the Sean Zay Show. This is,
Sean.
and I'm Zay, and welcome aboard to Warhammer Wednesdays. We are here to bring you lore, info, facts, and just all around vibe and good times, and just gossip and whatnot. Today we are going over the Necrons and the old ones. Video sourced by Luton. Again, you know, he's always one of my favorite YouTubers to watch or listen to on my off time.
Very reliable source.
I think you should definitely try it out a little more often than what you say you do.
Wise words. No, wise words. I agree.
But today we're just jumping into the history of the old ones and the Necrons. Basically the start before all of the Astartes, you know, the Empire, the Imperium as we know it now, I mean.
Mm-hmm.
So this takes place all before that. This kind of explains, you know, who the old ones are, who the Necrons are, which you meet later in the Warhammer universe. Which, brief explanation, then the Necrons are a race of immortal metal men, basically living metal, who
Kind of like Terminator.
who are really, really hard to kill. So
yes.
that's my input on it. You know, it's not professional input by whatsoever or any means, but I'm just kind of hoping that we can all enjoy and listen and give our input on it. Do you have anything to add, Sean, before we jump into this?
I think your description of basically almost nigh killable metal men is a very clear depiction. I think another great way to put it is also probably one of the most advanced civilizations, probably arguably even the most advanced civilization in all of Warhammer. And they have certainly a race superiority complex, which is that rivals almost entirely of humanity, and their rivalry of superiority. So I'm very excited to get into this topic. Necrons are one of my personal favorites. What do you think?
I like the Necrons, and I personally am really hoping to see a full-out war between them, like officially from Warhammer
Mm-hmm.
or Games Workshop. I don't know. At least to my knowledge, I don't know if there is any official great war between those two yet, because as far as I know, most of their kind is in stasis, sleeping in Tomb Worlds,
Waiting for the return.
waiting for the return. Yeah, I was just gonna say something along. They're waiting for something, but
Mm-hmm.
without further ado, I think we'll jump right into the video here, and we'll kind of let it play out for a little bit. We'll pause it and go over it a little bit. It's one of my favorite quotes. In the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war.
And there's a lot of
This is Luton. Welcome to my new series exploring the universe of Warhammer 40,000. 40k is a vast and fascinating universe with lore so complicated you could spend literally weeks discussing it. So one of the most difficult choices for me was where to begin with it. Now, the universe of 40k is such a mass of cross-referenced nuances and interlinked stories of revenge, justice, hatred and brutality. It's like trying to explain the whole of human history to an alien race. So breaking the lore of 40k down into YouTube videos is quite a complicated matter. Now, one last thing to mention is that Games Workshop themselves have stated that in the 41st millennium, information is fragmented, intercepted, distorted, suppressed, and often flat out just false. So with this in mind, a lot of 40k lore, beyond stuff that you would consider out and out facts, can be regarded more as hearsay than something that's just set in stone. This is especially true of ancient lore and race histories. This is in part because it allows Games Workshop to make changes to the universe without upsetting devout players, but it also makes a lot of sense in reality where war has been raging since almost the beginning of time. Also, if you look at humanity, it's often true that history is written by the victors, and so with that in mind, you might expect some facts within the universe of 40k to be anything from an eyewitness account to complete misinformation, which then translates to becoming the gospel word as it's passed down through the ages. So where do we start our journey into the grim darkness of the 41st millennium? At the beginning, of course. We leave the Imperium of Mankind behind and travel some 60 million years before to the earliest time where one peaceful, hyper-advanced race were masters of their own destinies. These beings are simply referred to as the Old Ones, and they are, as far as recorded, the first sentient life
here for
in
a
the
second.
universe.
What do you think of that? Most of the Imperium, or the history of man, or just the history of in this universe, to be fragmented and just all out what he said, he say, she say. Like, do you think that's true? Because I think in the 41st millennium, a lot of history is hidden, especially during the later series. Not knowing about chaos in the Imperium is straight up heretical. You'll be killed just for even mentioning it.
Yeah.
So, what they say about history being fragmented and unwritten, but I think that's a good way to keep the universe speculative and whatnot. What do you think?
I wholeheartedly agree. Although in the lore there are scholars and whatnot, and I think the Space Wolves, they call them scalds or something like that instead. Who they actually do keep documentations of the events of the Empire and what they go through and stuff like that. But as soon as any of the scholars actually publish any of their works, it must be actually read over by a member of the Inquisition, who then must either approve or deny it. And we both know that the Inquisition is very
Yeah.
let's just say not very friendly with the idea of
No.
information coming out, especially anything regarding heresy, chaos. I mean, even stuff about the Xenos and whatnot, and
Yeah.
the enemies of man. It's like you're told about the faith of the Emperor and doing your jobs as a civilian. That's kind of just it. That's all you're gonna be fed, and you don't get to know
matter
more.
in the
You
Imperium.
don't. You
You
do
don't.
not.
You really
one
don't.
bit. We will kill you if we feel like
Yeah.
it.
But it's just wild that humanity as a whole could lose vast amounts of knowledge, even in this time like that. Like, just be completely and totally clueless of anything.
Mhm.
Like, isn't it maddening that the average Joe doesn't know about stuff that happens like that? Like, it's not like today's society where like we know everything because we're involved in everything, right?
Yeah, and it's even to even go further on that point actually, is the fact that even the higher ups, because they are just because knowledge is such a scarce resource, even the higher ups are losing important knowledge and documentation, such as
Yeah,
like
yeah.
battleship plans and how do you build more of those.
Oh,
I mean,
100%. And
even the Adaptus Mechanicus keep losing their knowledge and information for
they
one reason or another.
they don't believe in inventing new things. If it's there, they believe that it's already there. That it's already meant to be discovered by humanity. It's wild that just utter vast amounts of knowledge just lost to time and stuff. Even in this thing, it's maddening to think about that they cannot reproduce what they already have most of the time.
Or like even like the gene seeds for Astartes and stuff like
Well,
that.
yeah, that was lost, with the Emperor.
That was lost a long time ago, yeah.
But anyway, let's get back into more of it and continue on.
Lives focused on the acquisition of knowledge and to seed the universe with life, terraforming and creating new species. including one unintelligent ape-like species on a small blue planet
That's
in the
Grandpa.
Milky Way. Now, very little specific details exist around the Old Ones themselves, but the story of their place in the grand scheme of things is where we will begin. Now, the Old Ones had great psychic powers and built many wonders of godlike beauty and size, and it was this vast understanding of the universe that allowed them to manipulate alternate dimensions and begin constructing their arguably greatest achievement, known as the Webway. Now, as its name describes, this is a web of pathways that allowed the Old Ones to travel through a vast sea of dimensional energy known as the Warp. The Warp was a dangerous and disruptive expanse of powerful psychic energy parallel to real space, although in the early times it was a lot more passive than it is in the 41st millennium, where it's extremely full of dark, horrific, chaotic energy. So to travel through it though, at this time it still required protected psychic pathways, and that's what they constructed. The Webway enabled the Old Ones to travel across unimaginable distances at incredible speed, essentially crossing space that would take millennia comparatively instantaneously, enabling them to reach the far corners of the universe. They believed that all life was useful, and they are known to have brought about the rise of numerous important species and formed thousands of worlds, which they also made their own. As the Old Ones expanded, they encountered other advanced species, although none as far as themselves, once again remembering we are at this time millennia before the dawn of mankind. One such race the Old Ones happened across were known as the Necrontyr. The Necrontyr's planet of origin was barren. It was radiation blasted due to their violent nearby star, making their home incredibly hostile to life. Their bodies were riddled with radiation sickness, and they lived extremely short lives, constantly preparing for their inevitable deaths. Their cities were built in anticipation of their demise, little more than vast tomb complexes with a few temporary homes for the living. Now, they vainly
Alright, let's
tried
discuss
to
this
improve
part
their
here.
mortality through science.
That's
So-
depressing.
It is super depressing. These guys come from essentially two worlds, you know, barren rocks, wastelands. Just think of like humanity after World War III, like what Einstein said. He don't know what World War III will be fought with, but he know World War IV will be fought with sticks and stones.
That's a really wow. I have not heard of that one before. That's genius.
But to be super advanced at the same time, though, that's crazy. Like to basically live amongst radiation and amongst the same beings that can literally mold planets into life. Isn't that nuts?
That is nuts, and honestly, kind of depressing. Something I wanted also to quickly bring up is, not that we're gonna get political or probably too deeply religious, but imagine believing in a not ultimate God, like an ultimate figure, because like the great old ones, they have a lot of power, but even they eventually find their defeat. At the hands of the Necrons and whatnot. And I mean, not right away after the second battle, but like the fact that the old ones themselves, they didn't just always exist. And although they created many life forms and whatnot, they didn't create every single planet ever. So that then brings into the question:
Yeah, that's what
are
they
there
said.
more
That
gods?
they already came across advanced species, but none as advanced as them. They were thousands of years ahead. That like the lore hasn't, and even in Luton, he says he even describes it in later videos, and I'm just gonna go ahead and spoil it. But these beings literally created, then what was it? The old ones, and
They created just about every race. They created humans, Necrons, or I don't know.
no,
About
not
No,
Necrons.
not
It was
Necrons.
the Eldar.
But the
Eldar.
Eldari and then the
The
orcs. Yep.
Yes, but the Eldar became super advanced, or just as advanced as the old ones did
Mm-hmm.
in the time. But you don't know who created the old ones.
Exactly. Yeah, that's my because that's what I think
That's
of
what
every
they.
single
That's what
time
they
you go
like to
through
keep a
this.
mystery, because if you knew definitively who created the old ones, it completely bores the lore, because you got to create more.
You're right.
You got to
you're
create
right.
more lore, more lore. It's better. That's why I absolutely, my personal take on Warhammer is the mystery it's shrouded in. It's
Mhm.
the absolute, like, you can just, like, you constantly like wondering about stuff.
And that's why I love Warhammer 40K is like you can this is why we're here now, right? We're sitting down talking about it, being like, man, what comes next?
I'm so
right?
thankful that this universe was created and the minds behind it. Like, holy
Uh,
crap! Like, I couldn't think of a better topic to discuss on a night sometimes. Or you can even talk about it for hours and just debate or like your own theories on what happened.
Yeah.
It's such a massive universe.
Yeah, there's a lot of wiggle room.
Mm-hmm. But let's continue on. See what
Scientific
else.
means, but after centuries they were consigned to the fact that their bodies could not be changed to survive on their home planet. Somehow though, despite this, they altered their plans to instead reach to the stars in a bid to escape their cursed cyclical fate of painful, unending death. And this is where they were to encounter the Old Ones. However, while the Old Ones were able to travel anywhere in space in mere steps and possessed near immortal length of life, the Necrontyr could not have been more opposite. They had to use slow-moving, non-warp ready ships equipped with stasis crypts that enabled the short-lived crew to survive out amongst the stars. They clad their ships in living metal, which was a metal literally that grows and lives like that of an organic material. And this was to allow it to withstand the rigors of spaceflight. Despite this though, colonization for the Necrontyr was a slow and painful process, as was everything in their history. But upon meeting the Old Ones and seeing their secrets of near immortality sparked a hope was raised within the Necrontyr. They finally saw a chance to be saved from their pain, a chance to live. And they petitioned the Old Ones for the secret of eternal life, but were refused this knowledge. In many ways, this refusal of knowledge doomed the universe to its fate of unending war and the events that were to follow.
That's crazy.
The Necrontyr burned with the resentment and hatred of the Old Ones and their unwillingness to save them from their pain and suffering. In addition to this, the Necrontyr Empire were battling brutal civil wars known as the Wars of Secession, which the various dynasties of Necrontyr were battling one another. The encounter with the Old Ones led the Triarch, the ruling councillor over all the Necrontyr, believed that an external...
And when they talk about the wars, they're not talking about a few years. They're talking thousands, hundreds of thousands of years at war. As far as my knowledge in the Imperium goes, or the Warhammer knowledge, is that there's always been a part of the culture and stuff, considering it's called Warhammer and whatnot. But, stupid assessment there. But the amount of time that people have spent fighting in this universe versus living peacefully is astounding. I even think about our own history and stuff, about how there's never truly long periods of peace.
No.
Ever. Nope. There's always got to be that one guy on top. Just like Warhammer, the Emperor, he wants to unite humanity. Humanity is the only goal, Screw the other races, the galaxy, right? Humanity only. But it's got me thinking, like, is that really a prosperous galaxy? That's heresy.
Right.
The Black Templars would be so disappointed in me.
Something I also wanted to comment on is how it's both funny, but also in a more serious sense, really depressing that the Necrons are finding enough time to kill each other. I mean, how depressing is that? I mean, first things first, war is bad. It's man against man, brother against brother, and that's heartbreaking enough. But like the Necron tier, what makes them especially depressing is they don't live very long anyways.
No,
so it's like
irradiated world, toxic.
It's like, do you know the meme of supernova versus coughing baby? It's not that. It's coughing baby versus coughing baby. That's just a depressing fucking fight. Like, I know I'm gonna die tomorrow, but I'm gonna kill you today.
Just say the hatred in Warhammer is just great, and everybody hates everybody.
People are so focused on killing each other, they don't have enough time to even look at themselves.
How beautiful the universe could actually be.
Or that, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, Let's jump back into it here for a little bit longer, and we'll go back over here in a little bit.
External foe would unify their species, and their bitterness to the Old Ones led to war, and it worked. The prospects of vast spoils and the secret to immortality brought the Necrontyr dynasties together to launch their campaign against the Old Ones. Their hopes, however, were typically short-lived, as the Necrontyr were unable to match or outmaneuver the Old Ones, whose use of the webway enabled them to always reinforce, preempt and win battles against the Necrontyr. Eventually, conceding defeat, the Necrontyr were forced to retreat to their homeworlds, defeated and, importantly, more bitter and full of hatred for the Old Ones than ever before. At this time, the Old Ones forgot about the Necrontyr. They'd been vanquished. But the Necrontyr had no intention of dying out so silently. Instead, they redoubled their efforts to find new weapons to destroy the Old Ones and achieve what they sought so passionately, the secret to immortality. During their research for new weapons, they became aware of creatures living from the destructive solar radiation from their sun. These life forms were named the Satan, star gods in the Necrontyr's language. Now, the Satan at this early time were not particularly aware of anything beyond their need to absorb raw energy and power. Their godlike energy seemed nearly invincible to the Necrontyr, the perfect weapon to unleash against the Old Ones, but if only they could harness that power. And they did through their living metal. They constructed bodies, empty husks, shells for the Satan to inhabit. And it's unknown how they contacted the Satan initially, but through some means they encouraged the Satan to take physical form using the living metal bodies that were constructed. Now, a Satan known as the Deceiver spoke with Zarek, the Silent King, Lord of the Necrontyr Triarch, and told him how long ago the Old Ones and Satan had also been at war, but the Satan were defeated and scattered. This common foe brought the Necrontyr and Satan to a close alliance, and the Necrontyr began to worship them as gods for their supreme power. But as the Satan, once without conception of the world around them, became more manifest and intelligent, it was clear they were not the salvation that had been hoped for. The Satan offered Zarek an offer for his race, immortality. But this was not to be the immortality of the Old Ones, but that of living metal shells that they had created for the Satan. They proposed that a great period of biotransference would take place.
You imagine like hating your enemy so much that you would willingly create your own destruction?
You damn your own people, basically, to eternal service.
You bond them to the living your souls to the living metal is basically what he said.
That's
For
depressing.
eternity, they may have gained immortal life, right? But at the cost of what?
They lose their minds. Those like weaker, like the simple servant and whatnot, who eventually would become
They
like,
go
like the
crazy and rage
warriors.
out.
They lose their minds, and then you had the flayed ones too. Dear Lord.
It's nuts. I don't know if I want to be a part of that race.
Hell no. Humanity first. Come on.
Yeah, obviously, man first. But can you imagine like how long ago too, like in the Imperium history is concerned of how long ago events like this took place, and as far as what they consider advanced technology in the Imperium,
That's crazy to think about, honestly. Yeah. Yeah.
they would consider living metal heresy. I do. I don't know. Quote me on that, but I'm pretty sure that would be considered heretical.
I'd assume so.
Because they worship the machine spirit and the god emperor.
Mm-hmm. I would say if they don't see it as heresy, then they probably see it as like how do I put
An
this?
embodiment or a living embodiment of the machine spirit. I think they would see that as.
Maybe, yeah. I could
That's
definitely
just
see that.
that's just our take or my take. It's not official lore or nothing.
No.
But let's get back into the video here for a little bit longer.
Mhm.
And
To give all Necrontyr that which they craved most, unending life. In his desperation for victory, glory and immortality, the Necrontyr Zarek agreed to transfer all other Necrontyrs into living metal bodies, that their flesh would be destroyed, but their minds and essence would live forever. This, however, was the biggest tragedy ever to befall the Necrontyr. Their minds were dulled to that of soulless drones, and only a few leaders maintained some semblance of their former selves, including Zarek. And it was at this time that Zarek realized he had made a terrible, terrible mistake, and doomed his entire race. The Satan turned the Necrontyr into slaves, ruling over them with extreme disregard and cruelty. The Necrontyr were extinguished from the universe forever, and the time of the Necrons had begun. But worse was still to come. We now return to the Old Ones, who during this time were largely unaware of the Necrontyr's demise, or the resurrection of their ancient enemy, the Satan. This ignorance would prove catastrophic, as the Old Ones were left with no time to prepare an adequate defense against one of the most destructive wars in the history of the entire universe, known in the ancient history of the 41st millennium as the War in Heaven. So named, it was a war literally between gods and on a scale of unimaginable proportions, making the wars between races in the current time of Warhammer 40,000 seem like mere skirmishes by comparison. This war against the Old Ones was very different to the first. The Necrons not only had more advanced weaponry, they now were protected in their immortal living metal form, and the Old Ones' mastery of the warp and webways was continually countered by the Satan with their immense power over the material universe. In this time, the Satan spread out like vicious predators, consuming entire worlds, feasting on the creations of the Old Ones, who now retreated to only their strongest bastions to plan a way out of complete annihilation. And all the while, entire worlds were razed, suns extinguished, and entire star systems devoured by the uncontainable Satan. The Old Ones had now retreated to the webway, only venturing out when it was essential, but even these once impenetrable paths were not untainted by the fury of the Necron. Facing complete extinction, the Old Ones seeded new life they hoped would protect them. These new races would have powerful psychic abilities to defend against the Satan. The early creations were the Eldar, the Knib and the Rashan, and whilst the Eldar would live through to the current time, almost nothing is known of the fate of the Knib or the Rashan, and it's entirely possible they were destroyed completely by the Satan and Necrons, with only the Eldar surviving this early time.
Never even heard of them.
Among their other creations were also those which would become mankind, beasts that lived in their own ecosystem but had no specific role defined for them by the Old Ones and were left to their own natural evolution. During these ancient times, the Eldar learnt a great many secrets of the warp from the Old Ones, who regularly visited them, mentoring them on how to control their psychic powers and learn to use the warp. Eldar legends originating from this time state that they were raised by figures of shadow and light, referring to them as First Ones. It is said they were the first to have reached into the starry night and to be older than gods, yet mortal and subject to time. They are said to have left the Eldar and returned to the sky in order to allow their charges to develop over millennia.
When they say when they chose to assist the Eldar, even though they helped create humanity, why did they favor them, you think? I honestly have no idea, and I don't think they've ever been totally clear on that, but I'm just curious on what you think. Why do you think they favored the Eldar more than humanity, or maybe the orcs even?
I think wisdom. I think the Great Old Ones are obviously very, very smart. The only time that we ever see them not being smart would be them not preparing for the upcoming war. Granted, these are so-called gods, but they're not like God that because they work in time, not outside of it, and henceforth they are subject to be caught at the wrong place or at the wrong time. And I think that because the Great Old Ones are very wise, they favor their wise and very smart creation.
It's just crazy that a race that achieves near godlike status can be toppled.
Yeah, that is crazy, isn't it?
Like, if it wasn't for all this in this universe, humanity wouldn't even exist.
No, not at all. Yeah.
If it wasn't for for the war and what it wouldn't, humanity just straight up wouldn't exist.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's not our case, but in this case, yeah, it wouldn't exist.
No. It's kind of interesting though. I like how they created mankind during this time period, but they didn't create us for war, or at least I don't think so in the lore, because wait a minute, does that mean that the Old Ones created the Emperor? No, wait.
That is a whole different topic for a whole
Holy
other day.
crap.
Fun fact. We'll get into that a little later
Yeah.
because there are several different theories on the Emperor of Man. So, and we'll veer off to the Horse Heresy series here a little bit, and as you know, as I finished the first book. This guy is still working on it because he's lazy.
Get the fuck out of here.
But yeah, that kind of dives in the Horse Heresy series. It's on Audible, by the way. It's a very good series. I'd totally recommend checking that out if you're a first time Warhammer
So
fan. You know, it dives into Horus and the Imperium and the heresy and stuff. So, which we'll get into later in this series as well. But might have to take a bathroom break here pretty soon.
No.
But derailed. What was I doing?
We were just talking about just before that we were talking about I brought up the question of did Big E was he created by the Great Old Ones, and then you talked about the books and Horus.
Yes. About how we'll get into that. But anyway, it's so perfect for first time, or if you're just straight up new to it, basically. That's kind of what I wanted to take from that. But we'll jump back into the video here for a little bit, and while that's playing, I'm gonna go use the restroom real quick.
I'll be the host.
And later in strange,
am the
vast
captain now.
vessels, but that were worn and scarred. This was of course due to them being engaged in an unending war against the Satan, with the Old Ones returning to inspect the Eldar and judge if they were fit for the war ahead. The Old Ones are known to have aided their younger race in focusing their psychic abilities to create warp-derived entities and use them as weapons against the vampiric gods of starlight, which of course is a reference to the Satan. Now the Eldar legends continue stating that in the time of the first ones, now dwindling in number to the point that they lost influence among the Eldar. And without their creator's sensibility and guidance, the Eldar's psychic creations born from the warp itself changed from sentient weapons into living gods of the Immaterium, who were the very, very first of their kind, and this change instigated not only the final catastrophe for the first ones, but in time would come back to haunt the Eldar themselves with apocalyptic consequences. The war in heaven continued, and by the time the Old Ones had prepared their forces, there were only 4 Satan in existence. But swathes of other life forms in the galaxy the Old Ones had seeded were already extinguished. The Old Ones finally unleashed the new races, sending the Necrons reeling as the power of the warp was an anathema to them, and they struggled to contain the advance of this new offensive. In response, the Satan unified for the first time in millions of years. However, now a new and devastating unforeseen side effect of the Old One's creations began to manifest in this period as the young race's psychic development disturbed the energies of the warp itself. And from this pure energy came mass and form, and older warp entities became predatory as the warp began to become a more hostile environment. Cracks in reality would appear, and the entities of the warp saw entry into the material universe, forcing the Old Ones again to bring about the emergence of new species to defend their final strongholds. They were now under assault from so many different directions, they barely had anywhere left to turn. Among their creations included the green-skinned ultra-violent Croc, later known as Orcs, and the technologically adept Jakiro. Now though, the Old Ones, even with their vast knowledge of creation and their near immortal lifespan, had run out of time. With their interstellar network being breached, their greatest work and places of power being overrun by the horrific beings of the warp, tragically it manifested by the very creations that they had formed to save them. Among the most insidious of these entities were the Enslavers, who penetrated and dominated the minds of the younger races in order to open portals for themselves to the material universe. The plague of enslavers was the final blow for the Old Ones, who were scattered forever, their power and knowledge destroyed. The combination of an unending onslaught from the Satan combined with the mistakenly unleashed warp horrors led to the Old Ones' complete destruction. The surviving Satan and Necrons had the final pleasure of seeing the demise of their most bitter enemy. Now after the destruction of the Old Ones, Zarek, lord of the former Necron tier Triarch as you all remember, was left biding his time, waiting until the time was right to strike and lead a Necron revolt against the Satan. The Necrons focused the unimaginable energies of the living universe into cataclysmic weapons created from all their amassed knowledge that were too devastating for even the Satan, the godlike Satan, to endure. And these Satan, near gods almost impossible to destroy entirely due to their very nature, were instead shattered across the universe into energy shards. Zarek now saw that having destroyed the Satan, the remaining new races created by the Old Ones, such as the Eldar, were becoming more powerful, knowledgeable and dominant. The Necrons, exhausted by eons of war, could not stand against them. So rather than risk certain annihilation, he ordered that the Necrons withdraw into their tomb worlds and slumber in the Great Sleep, to reawaken 60 million years in the future and assert their dominance over the galaxy once more. The Silent King, however, did not join his people in slumber. He destroyed a protocol that allowed him to control over the Necron race and journeyed out into the void of intergalactic space, where he may not find solace but instead penance for dooming the Necrontyr race in his deal with the now vanquished Satan. It was rumoured that the final Old One survived destruction from the Satan and Necrons. This survivor hid away where he continued his old ways of tweaking, dabbling and prodding around. Now we'll discuss about what he may have been doing in future content. When he was done with his work, he departed into the warp in order to hide and watch as the Old Ones knew the warp intimately. As the Necrons now retreated into stasis until this time of cataclysm had ended, the lesser creations of the Old Ones, such as mankind, continued their own paths of development, to eventually rise as powerful forces in their own right. The mantle of galactic dominion would now pass to the Eldar, but the Eldar would survive where the Old Ones did not, and would see the last Necrons depart into their great sleep after they had turned on the Satan. Now that concludes our history of the Old Ones in Warhammer 40,000. This really is the foundation for all events that would follow and sets a lot of...
Oh yeah, that is. So, an overview about that, what we said before about how they were in their great slumber and whatnot. That's 60 million years. So just think of the vast knowledge from, I can't exactly remember for the history between man and the Old Ones and the Necrons, but they were not even close for the Necrons being awakened yet.
No.
And the Astartes find their home worlds, or old tomb worlds of them locked up.
Mm-hmm.
And some of them, most of them, I think they don't even know what it is.
No. And what's crazy is when human colonizers look at the planet and go, this seems like a great place to build my home. So then they build a hive city.
It on top of a tomb world, yeah.
Yeah, and then next thing you know, the all the construction and buildings and industrialization of their planet creates a lot of tension and noise that is felt throughout the entirety of the planet, especially if it's a mining planet.
Mm-hmm.
That eventually scrambles with the systems for the Necrons, and boom, they're awake. And in droves, they go back to the surface. In the video,
he also mentioned about the Old One slipping away into hiding. And remember how I said we'd come back to the theories on the Emperor? What if the last Old One was the Emperor in a human body?
Well, as a Black Templar fan, I have to probably say that's probably maybe heresy.
It would be heresy because the Emperor is a man, not a divine being or not a Xeno.
Well, that's a tough thing to say.
He literally helped design the Primarchs and who they are today, though. And
yeah.
Astartes and whatnot.
And it has been actually seen that prayer does make a difference. Take Saint Celestine, for instance. She was literally blessed by the Emperor to be able to come back to life even after death. I don't know if you know this. Anytime Saint Celestine's, by the way, she's part of the Adeptus Sororitas. Anytime she dies, she sees a light over her corpse, and she just has to go over it and touch it. However, for every time that she dies, a new corpse, it's her corpse every time, she has to climb it. So, if she dies once, it's like, okay, well, got it. She dies 5 times. All right, you might have to walk a little funny. Okay, boom, you got it. 30 times. Okay, 10 times. Or sorry, like 100
I
times. You're
actually
gonna be
did not
climbing
know
a
that.
mountain.
That's actually interesting. I can't wait to
So-
dive into that too.
So prayer does make a difference. The God Emperor does have influence despite being a corpse, a Karen corpse on a throne, consuming 1,000 psychers every single day. He does still have presence. And I mean, he even is able to talk to Gilliman, of the Ultramarines when he confronts his father after years and years and years, because I think he went into a deep slumber thanks to Fulgrim, and eventually confronts his father, and he kneels before him and he listens to the words he says. And although the Emperor does not speak directly to him through the mouth, he does psychically. And it's really funny because it's kind of like, I really hate you, son. You should have done a lot more to try and make sure things got better. But you're also humanity's last resort for survival, so I guess you're cool.
I actually had heard of that, and I heard that it wasn't necessarily the Emperor speaking to him, but it was him voicing his own doubts in psychic form.
Really? I should read back into it and whatnot. That does
That's
sound pretty
just
interesting.
that's just opinion, but I think we should wrap this up for tonight.
Good call.
And we'll be back Wednesday with another video from Luton. I really, really think anybody who is new to Warhammer should definitely go follow him on YouTube and look at his advice and his lore. And definitely check out the Horus Harris series on Audible. It's very good read.
Mm-hmm.
And anything to add, Sean, before you close out here?
Ladies and gentlemen, have yourself a very lovely night.
The Emperor protects.
Amen.
Screens go dark, matches in, final thoughts before we end. Builds and battles, wins and fails, every take without the veil. If you missed it, replay. More game talk on the way. Sean and Zay, that's a show. Power down, time to go. Same place, same day, this is the Sean and Zay.
It's gonna be bad. I'm gonna dance to it.
It's actually a bot.
It's actually not that bad, yeah.
Disconnect.
I just hate fun, so I have to like crap on it.